With the latest on our hometown teams, this is Sports Wrap-Up with Bob Koshinski on WBBZ-TV, your hometown television station. Now, from our studios at the Eastern Hills Mall, here is Bob Koshinski.
And good evening. Welcome to Sports Wrap-Up. Bob Koshinski with you in our WBBZ studios here in the Eastern Hills Mall. Good show tonight. We've got Jack Armstrong, former Niagara basketball coach, now color analyst for the Toronto Raptors. We'll be talking hoops, March Madness. Jack will take a look at the local scene and a little bit of the NBA. But big news coming out of One Bills Drive today. Chaotic day for the Bills. First of all, at 4 o'clock, they released starting quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. What does that mean? They did try to restructure Fitzpatrick's deal. Fitz wouldn't go for it. That means they'll save $3 million in their cap hit for 2013. They'll save an additional $7 million on their cap for 2014. Why wouldn't Fitzpatrick go for the restructured deal? Big reason is the debacle that came out today. Buddy Nix, the GM of the Bills, was recorded by two 20-year-old pranksters in a phone conversation with Mark Dominic, the GM of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got both in a conference call. It's too long to go into here. But they were recorded, and Buddy Nix admitted in that private phone conversation that Fitzpatrick would not be a starter for the Bills this year. He'd be fighting for a backup. So I'm sure Fitz's agent got in Fitz's ear, said, if you're going to be a backup, don't go with the Bills. He will move on to, hopefully greener pastures. Andy Levitre reportedly signing with the Tennessee Titans. Let's take a look at college basketball. The UB Bulls, they knocked off Central Michigan last night in the MAC tournament, 74-72 in overtime. They'll now play Ball State in Cleveland Wednesday night in the MAC tournament. Turn to college wrestling. The UB Bulls hosted the MAC tournament Sunday out at Alumni Arena. 4 going to the Nationals. This young man right here, Mark Lewandowski, Lancaster graduate. He took second at 165. Other Bulls that'll be going at 125. He took fourth, but they're sending 4 from 125. Max Soria. Blake Rulo, 149 is going, and John Martin Cannon also taking second, going at 174. So congratulations to the UB Bull Grapplers who have earned a trip to Des Moines, Iowa next weekend, not this coming weekend, but next weekend. Our own Sports Wrap-Up producer Dave Task will be there producing the NCAAs. We'll be back with Jack Armstrong talking March Madness right here next on WBBZ-TV right after this. Welcome back to Sports Wrap-Up. My good friend Jack Armstrong in studio, and Jack and I go back to the 80s, I guess, right, Jack? When you first got the job at Niagara University. I think at that time you were the youngest Division I men's college basketball coach in the country.
26 years old.
Wow.
Now I'm old and 50.
Now you're the oldest color analyst in the NBA.
No, I'm still
really.
probably right in the middle area.
As long
there.
as Hubie Brown is still
Yeah,
still around.
Hubie's got me by 30 years at least.
When was it that you got the job at Niagara?
I was at Niagara 88 to 98. I was there 10 years. I was the head coach for 9.
Right, and you were an assistant 1 year with what, Andy Walker?
Andy Walker, and then I was the head coach for 9 years. So I was 26 years old when I was there.
And if I remember that, you got the job like literally in preseason.
Yeah, about a week and a half before practice started. Yeah. So it was kind of a jumping into onto a moving train, needless to say, and it was a wonderful experience. I don't have any regrets. It was just, I think back on it now, it was one of the most fun times in my life, and at the same time, one of the most stressful times in my life. Obviously, when you're a head coach at a Division I school, it's a lot on you, but I don't regret one bit of it.
And you still maintain a great relationship with Niagara.
Oh, no doubt. I still go to their games. This year my schedule has been crazy, so I haven't had a chance to go. But my boys have gone to basketball camp there, and Joe Mahalik is a great friend, has done a wonderful job there. I mean, Joe replaced me. He's been there 15 years now, so it's amazing. I've been doing the broadcasting now for 15, and Joe at Niagara for that period of time. So it's worked out well. I'm really happy about how their program has gotten to the point where year in, year out, they're in the discussion in the MAC conference.
Yeah.
And he's going to be in the NIT this year. And, you look at the core group that they have there now, they're going to be in the discussion the next few years.
I grew up being a fan of Niagara and the Purple Eagles, and back in the day with Calvin Murphy and Frank Layden and some of the great teams. They drive me crazy right now. They play no defense. They run up and down the floor. No victory is safe, and I will say no defeat is assured because they will pull some big games out. But the style, I mean, Joe is a great, look, this is just me talking now. Joe's obviously a great recruiter. I know his attitude. I know his philosophy is shooters won the war. So pretty much when he calls a timeout, I don't know why he even bothers to draw anything up. Because the minute they put the ball in, somebody's going to throw up a 3.
Well, you know what, though? You look at their team, and you look at the team that won the conference in Iona. You got to have skilled perimeter people. And I think he's done a wonderful job bringing those types of players in. You look at Green and obviously an Antoine Mason, to name a few. They've done a great job recruiting, I think, high-caliber players.
Yeah,
to
they've
the school.
got good athletes.
And the bottom line is, it's hard to get a good big man. I mean, it's hard. I felt very fortunate at Niagara. My problem was I had some good big guys. I didn't have enough good guards. And usually it's the reverse at the mid-Division I level. So, bottom line is when you have that type of skill level on the perimeter, and today's game is more about spreading the floor out, utilizing a three-point line, dribble penetration. The screen and roll is a big part of the game now. That's the style of play you got to play when you have those types of plays.
When did they institute that the regular season champ gets an automatic bid to the NIT?
If I'm not mistaken, just a few years ago, obviously the NIT has been basically taken over by the NCAA, and they wanted to give the conference tournament regular season champ some level of reward, because if you lose in your conference tournament, you go home. So I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I agree with it.
And now you have a lot to play for everybody. And I think it would be really difficult for Niagara to have such a great achievement and then not have another game to play. And I've always been a huge advocate of the NIT. I think it's a lot of times for programs that are maybe a year away or have had a great year and yet they get knocked off in the tournament. There's got to be a place for them, and I think it still has a lot of relevancy to the landscape of college basketball. Now, these other tournaments, it gets to the point where I can't even name them. There's 2 or 3 others. It gets to the point where everybody continues to play, which is like the bowl season in college football.
Now, I remember when I was just a kid, and I remember my dad always telling me that, in the 50s, the NIT was bigger than the NCAA.
Yep.
And ironically, and this still is ancient history, folks, but 1970, when Niagara went to the NCAA with Calvin Murphy and Bob Churchwell and Marshall Wingate and some of the great players, the team actually took a vote, and they wanted to go to the NIT because it was in New York City, and the guys thought this would be a great trip. It would be a lot of fun, and Frank Layden had to step in and say, no, we need to go to the NCAA, and they beat Penn in the first round, and they ended up ranked 18th in the country that year. Many people don't remember that, but the NIT was always a big tournament because of the New York City base to it. Back then, of course, New York City, and it's still the media capital. But now for Niagara to earn a berth to the NIT, you're right. If they had just lost in this tournament and the season was over, to have won all those games during the regular season, it would have been meaningless.
Well, I look back on the best year that we had at Niagara. We went 23-7, and it was a devastating loss. We led for 39 minutes, 58 seconds. We lose to Manhattan on national TV, on ESPN, in the conference final on a disputed play at the end. What if we didn't have another game? I mean, that would have been an incredibly bitter pill to swallow. We ended up playing Boston College, a team that a year later knocked off #1 North Carolina, was in the Elite Eight. They were terrific. They had 3 NBA players on that team. And we had an opportunity to play in the NIT. We came up a little short against them and had a great year. But to have gone home after that game against Manhattan would have been a really, really bitter pill to swallow. So I think, again, for a lot of teams around college basketball, to have that one more chance and that new lease on life, I think is a really cool thing.
Canisius College, Jim Barron. He did a great job coming back. Of course, everybody remembers him at Bonaventure for all this time. He went to Rhode Island, had a great career at Rhode Island. Canisius, for the first half of the season, was, I would think, maybe the best team in the MAC. What do you think happened to Canisius in the second half?
I think they just kind of wore down a little bit. And, the key is the rebounding was an issue for them. Their front court play was inconsistent at times. But in general, it was a wonderful season for Canisius. I mean, they've turned the corner, and I'm thrilled for Jim. I've known Jim a long time. I have a ton of respect for him. I got to point out, though, that Tom Parada, who was the head coach at Canisius prior to that, I coached him at Fordham. He was my assistant at Niagara. He took a lot of losses on the chin, and there were a lot of those good young players that were there when Jim got there. And then, obviously, Jim bringing his son in, and his son is a fabulous player. And, you look at what they've done there, though. I think that, you look at Jim Barron, St. Francis, St. Bonaventure, Rhode Island, and now at Canisius. He is a guy that understands how to build a program. He's an outstanding coach. He's a man of integrity. His kids graduate. He does it right. And, when the Canisius job opened up, I thought it would be an absolute, not even a home run, it would be an absolute grand slam if they were lucky enough to get Jim Barron. So it worked out beautifully for both sides. It's another opportunity for Jim to coach. It's funny. It wasn't funny. I did a last game of the season, last season, UMass, Rhode Island. It was Jim's final game. I did that game on TV. And then a day later, he was let go. So to see him, here we are 365 days later, and he's gone through a season as a head coach at Canisius, and what a fabulous year they had. Again, I think they have a lot of pieces in place there to be a significant contender in the MAC for the next few years.
His son's coming back for one more year,
Yep.
right? Yeah, that should be interesting to see him again next year. Hey, we're going to take a break. More basketball with Jack Armstrong right after this. Welcome back to Sports Wrap-Up. I have with me Jack Armstrong. Jack, this was a coincidence. St. Patrick's Day is coming up Sunday. I didn't bring in one of my Irish friends just for St. Patrick's Day, but it just worked out that way.
I'm thrilled to be here,
Yeah.
and you're right. Sunday is the big day.
Yeah.
The granddaddy of them all. Both of my parents from Ireland, so of course this is the day.
But you'll be working.
I'll be working. The Toronto Raptors play the Miami Heat that day, so I will have the green corsage on and the green tie, so don't worry about it. And it's a 1 o'clock game, so there's still plenty of afternoon and early evening to celebrate.
Now, I'll be marching with the WBBZ-TV crew in the Buffalo St. Patrick's Day parade. I will be.
A Polish guy?
A Polish guy.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
In South Buffalo?
I'm just warming my legs up for the Dingus Day parade.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's in Main Street. I think we cross through a lot of neighborhoods. But our good friend John DeShulo has assured me that I will be. I think I'm walking between Carl Palladino and Steve Pigeon. So between people throwing stuff at them, they'll be missing me, I think. Jack, first of all, let's talk. You were talking about your tenure at Niagara University. So after you left Niagara, you did a lot of work with us at the Empire Sports Network. You've really, first of all, how long have you been with the Raptors
15 years.
You've been with the Raptors for 15 years.
Well, I left Niagara, yeah. I got right into broadcasting. I was lucky enough to be hired here in Western New York by Empire Sports Network, and did college basketball, still do, for all the different networks, Comcast, ESPN and MSG Network, and obviously, and then at the same time, I was hired to do the Toronto Raptor games. So it's just worked out beautifully for me. I'm very fortunate.
Well, you married that beautiful Italian girl, Dina, in the Falls, which I think your whole fortunes just turned around after that, didn't they?
I guess I overachieved. That's an understatement. And when you think about it, the fact that I work in Toronto and I could still live here in Western New York, I love living in Western New York. I'm a big fan of Western New York. Buffalo Bills season ticket holder, Sabres season ticket holder. When I have the opportunity to go to the games, I love it. It's a great community. Growing up in Brooklyn, Buffalo has that same feel. People look after each other, and someday I hope to see the Sabres win a cup and the Bills win a Super Bowl.
Let's not go crazy. Now, I'm half Italian, I'm half Polish, well chronicled. I've been to some tremendous family weddings. One of the absolute greatest weddings I was ever at was your wedding, which was in the parking lot. Now, and I don't want anybody to think it was like some hillbilly affair. There was like a tent set up that was better than my house.
We had over 400 people. Yeah.
Your friends from downstate had so much fun.
Well, they're all cops and firemen and garbage men and telephone guys. And
they have a beer or two.
We went through 16 kegs of beer.
Wow.
And then they had to bring in reinforcements after that with caseloads of beer.
So unbelievable.
Well, a lot of Irish Catholics from Brooklyn, so they have a tendency to tip a few.
I think there's a lot going to confession the next day. I might be wrong. Jack, college basketball. We were talking before we went on the air. The game has changed. College basketball has changed. And, I grew up during the era, and even going to college, I went to the University of Dayton, had a nice program, and, Dayton would play schools like Notre Dame with
DePaul, Marquette,
right, and then you had UCLA was the top dog. And, I mean, UCLA, to think of how powerful and how dominating UCLA under John Wooden was, that can't happen any longer in college basketball. Players don't hang around for 4 years anymore to build those kind of dynasties.
We have a watered-down product, not only at the professional level, and I think we would all agree that, when you consider the fact that you have 32 teams in the NFL and, 30 in the NBA, and I think 32 in Major League Baseball. I don't know how many we have in hockey, probably right around 30. There's too many teams.
Right.
And quite frankly, then that trickles down to the collegiate level when you have a situation now where there's a demand at the professional level for these guys to come up earlier, particularly the impactful guys. And therefore, you have guys that'll play 1 year in college basketball and they're gone. So the thought of even a Western New York native like Christian Laettner playing 4 years at Duke, he's one of the all-time greats in college basketball. Today he would play 1 year at Duke and he'd be off to the NBA.
Right.
And it really compromises college basketball. So now you have guys playing in the ACC Big East that maybe would have been playing in the Atlantic 10. And you have guys that maybe were MAC players that I coached years ago that are now playing in the Atlantic 10. So everyone's reaching a little bit, and I think it waters the product down at every level. And I'd love to see it. I've made this point. I would love to see the NBA really consider long and hard, rolling that back to maybe 2 years in college or even 3. But on the other hand, if you're a young man that needs the money, you're saying, hey, wait a minute, what's in it for me here?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a tough thing to work out on both sides. I'll say this, though. The players' union is impacted a lot by what the agents tell them to do. And the agents want the young talent coming in because the quicker you get that first contract, more importantly, the quicker then you get your second contract, which is where the big money is. But they're flushing veteran players out of the system every year because all the first-round picks have guaranteed money. So at the end of the day, it's an agent-based business. And the agents, in a lot of ways, are the tail that wags the dog.
I want to still have a chance. I want to bring this up because for those watching, and we haven't brought his name up this year, but Johnny Flynn, who went to Niagara Falls and played a couple years at Syracuse, went to the NBA, got a good contract.
Yeah.
What happened to Johnny?
He's
Flynn?
Overseas now, and quite frankly, he bounced around a little bit. I saw Johnny this fall. He was playing with the Detroit Pistons. But they didn't have any room for him. They had 15 guaranteed contracts, so there was no room for him. And there was another guy on that team, Terrence Williams, who was at camp from Louisville, who was a lottery pick as well. And there was no room for him. I mean, I was talking to Lawrence Frank, the head coach of the Pistons. He goes, just shows how competitive this business is. I got 2 lottery picks from a few years ago. They're going to be out of the league. Right. I have no room for these guys. So, when you get your chance, you can't mess it up. When you get your chance, you got to take advantage. And unfortunately for Johnny Flynn, with the Timberwolves, with the Rockets in particular, he just wasn't able to get it going. And hopefully overseas, he's able to kind of reinvent himself as a player and have an opportunity to get back in the league. But it will be difficult.
He had a hip injury. A lot of people think he never really totally came back from that hip injury.
Well, the hip, obviously, definitely. That's an issue for him. And at the same time, it's also about knowing how to run a team. The idea of being a scoring-minded point guard is one thing, but you got to make the other 4 guys on the court better, and you got to set the tone for your team defensively, and you got to be able to mesh with the coach that you play for. And there have been some issues there with that. And I think for him right now, I hope for his sake that, the experience of playing overseas in some ways reignites that passion. Right. And more importantly, the message that he was getting from his coaches, that he's able to bounce back.
Real quick, because we got so many things to catch up on, but the NCAA brackets obviously haven't come out yet. I won't put you completely on the hook, but give me your Final 4.
Hard. I would say, I'm not dodging you, Bob. I'd say impossible right now until we all have an opportunity on Selection Sunday to look at the brackets, because every night there's like 3 teams getting knocked off. I mean, I don't know how you can pick it. I would say right now, when you look at a Duke, though, with Kelly in the lineup, they're a team that really is intriguing to keep an eye on because they're a totally different team with him. Indiana's been a solid team throughout the year. The Big Ten's been a great conference. You think of Michigan, John Beilein, Western New York native. Michigan State, Ohio State. That's a conference to keep an eye on. Georgetown has been a solid team. Syracuse, Marquette, Louisville. There's a lot of Notre Dame. There's a lot of good teams from that conference. But quite frankly, I think it would be a disservice to sit here and say, here's your Final Four, because someone's going to turn around and say, well, that's who I should pick. But on Sunday, hopefully people are sober enough to do their picks because it's St. Patrick's Day, and so and the selection.
Not everybody's Irish.
So wait till Monday morning. Okay. No rush getting your selections in.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Armstrong. Jack, always great seeing you. And
we're done already.
Yeah, we're done. Buddy.
Wow, this thing flies by.
Yeah, time to have a great St. Patrick's Day.
You too.
We'll be back to wrap up Sports Wrap Up right after this.
Guests of Sports Wrap-Up receive a gift certificate to dine at Ilya DePaulo's Restaurant and Ringside Lounge, 3785 South Park Avenue in Blaisdell.
Well, it's time to say goodnight. We want to remind you that coming up April 12th, the New York Yankees, Baltimore Orioles, right here exclusively on WBBZ-TV. Yankees baseball all season long. You can catch it on your favorite hometown station. That's going to do it. Next week we'll be talking Sabres and Bills. Until then, this is Bob Koshinski saying have yourself a good night and a much better tomorrow.